Okay, so we left off yesterday. We had done the looking at the valves. There we go. Looking at the valves, talking about volumetric efficiency and valve overlap. What do you call it? Well, it's right there. What do you call it when the valve is open? It's called duration. There we go. Okay. So I said I'd write notes for that. So we're in the middle of writing the notes. So we started with the valve timing. Let's see, the intake valve opened at 50. Talked about why it opens early. And let's see, it closes. Why does it close late? Closes about 30 degrees after bottom dead center. It closes 30 degrees late. And again, it's all about the inertia of moving gases. So allows inertia of the moving intake gases, intake gases to fill the cylinder before it starts compressing. Well, I should say the piston. All right, the exhaust valve. Let's see, exhaust valve. And that opened, in our example, about 30 degrees before bottom dead center. And that allows the expanding gases to start evacuating the cylinder near the end of the power stroke. This allows the expanding gases to start evacuating the cylinder at the end of the power stroke. At the end of the power stroke. Well, like we said yesterday, since most of the energy of the fuel is expended, well, we talked about the fuel was burnt by about 14 degrees, but we didn't talk about the energy. So the energy is this. Most of the energy of the fuel-air mixture, is expended by about 80 to 120 degrees after top dead center. So top dead center, we've compressed it, we're on the power stroke, it starts at the top, the bottom is 180 degrees, so by about 80 to 120 degrees, all the energy pushing down on that cylinder, it's expended. No more energy left. All you've done is bottled up that hot air, right? Which is about how much?
How much was the hot air?
Temperature.
About 1,400?
Yeah, around 1,700. I'm just thinking exhaust gas temperatures run well into the 15. Normal exhaust gas temperature about that far into an exhaust stack is somewhere about 1,500 degrees. Do you have a EGT on your?
Yeah.
With readout?
Yeah.
What's your
830 EDM.
Yeah, what's your EGT running about?
I think about 15, yeah.
Yeah, it's about 15, so it's going to be higher than that inside the cylinder by quite a bit. Let's see, so we don't want to keep that in there, so why not let it out? So allowing heat to escape early. I don't know if you want to call it early. I mean, it's done doing its job, so get it out of there. Early allows engine to run cooler. run cooler. Rather than just taking that heat and transferring it to the cylinder fins and letting it dissipate there. I can finish that. Rather than let me see, transferring I'll say more heat to piston rings and cylinder walls. And included in that, of course, would be valves. So let's see. So there we go. So it closes. The exhaust valve closes about 25 degrees after top dead center to allow inertia again. To allow the inertia of the gases to scavenge remaining exhaust gas, and help bring in fresh fuel air mixture. There we go. And then the last point here is our valve overlap. Let's see. I got too much written. Notice that the intake valve is open 50 degrees for top center. Exhaust stroke is open 25. Valve overlap, I'll just make this more simple. Valve overlap is when both valves are open at the same time. All right, let's do one more. Determining valve duration. What's duration mean? How long it's off its seat, how long it's open. All right, so I've got if the following. And I wrote this down that this is a Continental, not that it matters to you, Continental E185. That's an old Bonanza engine. It was the original 0470 before they called it 0470. It's 185 horsepower, 470 cubic inch engine that they made for the Bonanzas. So we will say the IO, what's the IO going to stand for? Intake opens, in this case, intake opens. The intake opens 15 degrees before top dead center. The exhaust opens 55 degrees before bottom dead center. The intake closes 60 degrees after bottom dead center, and the exhaust closes 15 degrees after top dead center. All right, see if you can figure that one out. I shall play some Jeopardy music. I shall pause. All right, running. Okay. All right. Well, the simple way I think to do it is just what I showed you. We have intake, compression, power, exhaust. Kind of make those right there. If you feel like it, you can put exhaust over here, and you can put exhaust intake here, duplicate it, but right here's our 1, 2, 3, 4 strokes. All right, so intake is going to draw air in, so it's moving down. Compression, the piston moves up. Power, piston moves down. Exhaust, it moves up. Intake moves down. Exhaust, it moves up. So that means the piston's going to be here. So this is going to be top dead center here. Bottom dead center here. Top dead center there. Bottom, top, bottom. I just like to look at it like that. It kind of helps me out. All right, so we have the intake valve. Well, I know the intake valve is going to be open during the intake stroke, right?
Yes.
All right, that's a given. And we can take the rest of the information and say the intake valve opens 15 degrees before. So we'll just go over here. That's 15 degrees. And the intake valve is going to close 60 after. That's 60 after. So we've got 180 degrees here. So it's 15 plus 180 plus 60. That equals
255.
how much?
255.
255. Do the same for the exhaust. I know that the exhaust is going to be open right here. So exhaust, let me see, exhaust opens 55 degrees before. 55 degrees before. And the exhaust is going to close 15 degrees later. 15 degrees later. So that's 55 plus 180 plus 15 equals
250.
250? You think I would have wrote the answer? 250. All right, I'll take your word for it. 250. All right, let's see. Oh, I did write it down. 255. And exhaust is 250. What is my valve overlap?
30.
30. I did a terrible job of showing valve overlap because I should have done it over here. Should have finished my intake. This intake right over here is 15. I just picked it up from right there. Right, 15, 1, 5. So valve overlap is 15 plus 15. So valve overlap is 30. Let's see. Wow, what if I threw this at you? Well, then how many degrees are the valves closed? How many degrees total are the valves closed? Well, how would you do that? Well, I would pick it up right here to here, right? And I would just do, so between this point right here and this point right here, how many degrees is this? 720. Out of 720, we would subtract.
360.
Oh, go one thing at a time. Does everybody follow?
255.
180.
So, right here, I would subtract 180,
60,
60,
55,
55,
180.
and 180. Subtract those. Don't just jump in and subtract the two numbers we got. So, whatever that equals. How much is this right here?
470.
470? So 720 minus 470 is?
150.
That doesn't sound right.
250.
Are we
245.
guessing?
Yeah.
Do I need a calculator? Huh?
250.
Put down 50 instead of 55.
Well, this is what happens when I bring in my calculator. Are we sure that 180, 60, 6, that's 180, 180, 360. What's that?
Shouldn't it be 55?
Shouldn't it be 55?
65.
You should have told them where to put 55. Oh man.
All right, 720. Out of 720, we subtract 180 and 60, yes?
Correct.
And then we subtract 55. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be 55? How about help me out? Hey, where you wrote 50, that should be 55. Because I'm looking at all this going, no, that does not equal 55.
I figured I'd say 55 and then ring a bell.
No. And then we have this, which is 180. So 180 plus 180 plus 60 plus 55 equals, that's 475. So all this mess there is 475. So 720, 720 minus 475 equals 245. 245. Does that sound right?
Yes.
All right, let me see. Yeah, that's what I wrote down. Hey, good for me. All right. I didn't realize I actually wrote it. So you can do both those things without any problem. I can't, but maybe you can. So, all right. Okay, last bit about volumetric efficiency. Let's see. Sí, senor. Volumetric efficiency. Volumetric efficiency is always more than 100% or always less than 100% in a naturally aspirated engine. Less than or normally aspirated. Okay, so volumetric efficiency in a normally aspirated engine is always less than 100%. Volumetric efficiency can also be increased through the use of turbo superchargers, a turbocharger, a supercharger, or ram induction. So as a reminder, turbo is something that runs off the exhaust. The way I'm using the word, supercharger is something that is run off of a gear or belt driven. It's driven off of the engine directly. And ram induction is just ram air coming into the inlet due to the force of the aircraft moving forward. All right, let's talk about ignition timing. That in the same way that valves open early, the spark is early. So if we go back to our, do I have it? There we go. All right. Back to our 4-stroke engine here. Notice the spark plug always sparks, ready, set, spark, at top dead center. That is not true. It would work, just like the valves opening and closing at top dead center, bottom dead center. It'd work just fine. It's not a problem with that, but it's just not that efficient. So it doesn't spark there. It sparks about 20, 25 degrees before it reaches top dead center. So during the compression stroke, as it's coming up, it will ignite and light off the fuel-air mixture. The reason why it does that is because it takes a while for fuel to burn. And I don't know, you kind of look at it like, well, if we started the fuel burn right there, the fuel burn would basically be about the same speed as the piston, and you would not get a whole lot out of it. It's a way of looking at it. I don't know if that's entirely correct. So if we do it early, the piston's coming up 25 degrees before top dead center, we light it off there, the fuel will start burning. It doesn't burn, it doesn't light off instantly. It's got a flame front that moves out. So that flame front can start, but the piston's going to continue to come up and compress. And then right about the time that the piston gets to the top and starts its way back down, that flame front is actually now starting to push on the piston because it's already been burning. So now it will push the piston down rather than kind of follow it down. Hopefully that made some sense. So let me see. So we got to spark it early. So timing is usually about ignition timing. Is usually about somewhere between 20 to 25 degrees before top dead center. Now in your car, it's not fixed, it's variable. It always has been, I think. You know, you go way back in the day when we had distributors and for computers, and they would use a vacuum advance. Loss of vacuum would mean the engine is running at a higher RPM. You'd have this little plate that would have a spring on it. It would rotate, which would take the finger and advance the little finger as it heads towards the tower and change where the points would open. and it would spark early, and then we'd slow down. It would actually have this mechanical plate would move back and forth, and eventually they used vacuum, and it was just springs.
They were mechanical, centrifugal.
Yeah, that's it, centrifugal with the springs. And then they went to more of an electronic version that would just pick up the RPM and change it. And now we have our modern computers that do it. For the most part, aircraft don't do that. We have a magneto, which is just a well, you guys know, you just finished the class. 2 people haven't. We have a self-contained little apparatus that just sparks when it's supposed to, and that's it. It only has two modes, and they are on and off, or it can spark at 2 different times. What are those 2 different times it can spark at?
Early or late?
What?
Early or late?
I was looking. Yeah. What makes it spark early?
Impulse code?
Impulse coupling. So we can either fire it at around top dead center or where it's supposed to be. That's it. Well, now more and more companies are coming out with electronic ignition for aircraft, where we can take off one magneto, install the electronic ignition box, which actually, depending on how you set it up, you can set it up so it goes to. Either one of you guys have that?
I don't.
Yeah, you have it, right? Did you hook yours up to the manifold so it's variable timing?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's an option on some of them. You can hook up the manifold pressure and then do variable timing on it, or variable ignition timing. But that's pretty new stuff right there. But for the most part, it's about 20, 25 degrees before top dead center. If a little bit of something is good, a whole lot of something is better. So if I timed my engine so that the spark is happening, let's say 25 degrees before the piston reaches top dead center, and that actually gives me a little more power because it's creating more pressure in the cylinder because of the way the fuel is burning by the time the piston comes up. So I have more pressure. If I have more pressure, I'm going to have more power. So what happens if I bump it then? So it's a little bit earlier than that. Go to 25, because that'd be earlier. Bigger the number, the further down it was. Go a little bit more. What happens?
Raise cylinder temperatures.
Cylinder head temps start going up because you start setting that fuel on, igniting the fuel. The burn is inside the cylinder longer. You keep going, you can eventually get detonation because it's creating too much pressure at some point. So yeah, you can't just keep going and going. So in aircraft, we don't get to experiment. It tells you exactly. It doesn't say something like, well, timing on the engine should be 20 to 25 degrees. Aircraft, it's like, it's 20. That's where you're supposed to set it. They'll have sometimes say plus or minus 1 or plus or minus 2, but that just means we want 20, and if you can't get 20 because you're just not that good, we'll let you, get a little sloppy of it. So this information, this info, what the timing is engine specific. And found, where would I find that information?
Engine manual?
Okay, that was my first one, type certificate data sheet. Where else? I'll just tell you.
Engine service manual.
Yep, engine service manual would work. I have, we'll put that one then. Engine maintenance manual, same thing, service manual. Maintenance manual, overhaul manual, it's all the same thing. What else we got? How about the engine data plate? It's almost always on the data plate. A data plate you got to be a little bit careful with. It should not happen because data plates are a big deal in aviation. There are companies out there where you can just order a new data plate, and the FAA gets really angry about that. You lose a data plate, you're supposed to go to the FAA, explain to them that you lost your data plate. You're supposed to get a letter from the FAA. In fact, you can't get one out of Lycoming or Continental unless you have a letter from the FAA authorizing them to send you a new data plate. So it's a big deal. With the Lycomings, as you've already seen, if for some reason your oil sump was damaged and you went out to Kenny Faith, that's our salvage yard, bought a new oil sump, it could have a data plate on it. And you can see like year 290 and 0320 sump fits it. So suddenly it says 0320, but it's not, it's 0290. So you gotta be very careful that somebody didn't swap data plates. If they did, that's kind of a big deal. It should never happen, but, and that the data plate is correct. On small Continentals, there was an airworthiness directive a long time ago where these cylinders were kind of coming apart. And so to solve it, they had to reduce the pressure in the cylinder. And to reduce the pressure in the cylinder, they backed the timing off a couple of degrees. And the airworthiness directive said you were supposed to go to the data plate and stamp over it the new timing. And that happened for the most part. Then Superior Aircraft, Superior Air Parts came along and started making a lot of parts, and they were much better. They kind of raised the bar up a little bit, and they went to the FAA and said, hey, if people buy our cylinders from Superior, they're not going to come apart. You can go back to the old timing, which technically should give you more power. It should have been a reduction in power. They didn't talk about that. And so everybody started buying those cylinders and then putting the timing back the other way. So then you had stamped on the data plate, was stamped, and you had to go back the other way. So it was kind of weird. So then Continental upped their game, said, okay, we'll just make cylinders better, which is kind of my way. So, and then service bulletins. Service bulletins are ADs, like I just said, one AD for Continental. Continental used to be more of the AD or service bulletin. I had a book, service bulletins, letters, instructions, and then they went to the M0 manual where they took all the service bulletins and put them in a manual, which is kind of hard to get used to, but it's the way it is. So I think we'll talk more about timing later, perhaps. But anyway, you want to make sure you have the right timing. Oh yeah, we'll definitely talk about timing later. All right, firing order. That is the order in which cylinders are fired. The order. I'm going to back up. So ignition timing. Where would I find the exact timing for your 0290? And I kind of guess I wouldn't expect you to know. You haven't looked for it yet, but I'm going to tell you right now, it is not in the engine overhaul manual.
The logbook?
I would never look at the logbook. You have to trust the last person.
True.
Just don't want to do that.
Sir,
Yes.
Ours had the firing order on the side of the engine.
I know, but I backed up a little bit to talk about ignition because I remembered I wanted to
Oh,
talk
okay.
about something.
I was writing something.
The service bulletins.
Yeah, service bulletins and the data plate, but I would go to the service bulletins on that. It is not in the overhaul manual. In the overhaul manual, it says it tells you how to time it. And it says something of the fact that it describes the process, pull out the spark plug, rotate the propeller through until you feel compression on number one cylinder. When you come to top dead center of number one, back it off about 25 degrees and time the engine. So what is the timing for that engine?
Doesn't tell you.
Did I tell you what it was? I used a word.
Valve.
Mm-hmm. Does that sound right? No, but that's what it says. So I'll tell you right now that when we get into the next class, and you have to time engines, this class won't do it, but so in my other classes, I'd walk out and I go, okay, what'd you time it to? 25 degrees. And where did you come up with 25 degrees? It says right here, about this. I'm like, oh, so we're doing abouts now. It's not. It's what it wants you to do is back the propeller off about, maybe it's 20, I don't know if it's 25, whatever it says, and then go forward to the right timing. So be careful with that. That's not what, it doesn't tell you the timing, it just tells you to back the prop off so many degrees and then bring it forward to the correct timing. People don't read the rest of it or understand it. And we talk a lot about that, kind of a confirmation bias. You're like, oh, that's what that must mean. It's not what it means, so be careful. So, all right, firing order. Order in which cylinders are fired. Best place to find the firing order is on the side of the engine. It's always there. Let's see. So let's see. Cylinder numberings. I'm just going to put cylinder. Save time. See world. Cylinder numbering is not standard. It's not a fixed thing on opposed or inline engines. In other words, one manufacturer, like Chevys and Fords, they're not the same. In fact, I just figured out the other day, even Ford doesn't do it the same. There was different ways of arranging it, apparently. Let's see. So with light, I think I'm out of room here. I am out of room. Everybody's good?
No.
Eh. All right. Let me clear this. Oops. All right. So Lycoming, let's talk about Lycoming. By the way, we pronounce it Lycoming. You know how they pronounce it back east? Lycoming. Let me see. The number 1 is where? Anybody remember? Right front. And number 2 is left front. Oh, I got a picture, I think. Cool. There we go. What are these? Lycoming. This is my Lycomings. Right front, right front, right front. What? So 6-cylinder models, right front. 8-cylinder, right front. 4-cylinder, right front. The integral accessory drive models, they're going to go over here on the left front, apparently. You have, okay, the accessory drive. You guys know what the accessory housing on your engine was? The first thing it took off the top? Okay, some Lycomings have an integral accessory. It's all part of the same case, much like Continental does it with their bigger engines. And they're obviously going to put that cylinder over there. Firing order is 1, 3, 2, 4 for 4 cylinders. For 6 cylinders, I will not and have never not memorized that because Continental does it different. Never worked on an 8-cylinder, so I'm not committing that to memory. And there's very few LIOs out there, and if I want to work on them, I'll just kind of look at the data plate. So, but the 4 cylinders is easy enough to remember. Continental. Continental, of course, has to be different. Number 1 is the right rear. So 1, 3, 2, 4. 1, 3, 2, 4. Same with 1, 3, 2, 4. 1, 4, 5, 236. 1, 4, 5, 236. Nope. But let's go back and take a look at this here, because this is kind of fun. Let's see. 1, 3, 2, 4. Right, right, left, left. So it's firing. So right, right, left, left. That's the way it fires. The 6-cylinder is going to go, oops. 1, this will make more sense. 1, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6. That to me makes sense. It's always an opposing. Next one down, opposing. What does Continental do? Well, right, right, left, left, right. I'm sorry. Continental. Right, yeah, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. And they go back to the front. Then, yeah, 1, 6, 3, 2, 5, 4. But it goes right, left, right, left, right, left. And so does the other one. Radial engines. Let me see. I don't think I need to write all that stuff. You'll figure it out. And why, we'll go back. Why do you think that they did 1, 3, 2, 4 and 1, 6, 3? What's the whole point behind that? There you go. Just got to reduce vibration. It's the way that they figured out it's going to fire and decrease the amount of vibration. We're going to talk more about vibration a little bit. Vibration in aircraft engines can be a lot more of a problem than just uncomfortableness for you. Okay, radial engines. Radial engines. First thing we have to do with this, figure out if I'm standing behind the engine or if I'm standing in front of the engine. Am I the pilot or the mechanic? And the engine should turn let me go back to this. Which way did engines turn? What's that? Clockwise. Clockwise. From whose perspective? Pilot's perspective. We're standing behind the engine. I can remember that because right here we have some weirdness. The LIO, the L means left. So if it turns to the left, they got to add an L. And none of our engines have L's. Almost all of them are just O, I, O. We'll get into that. So it's pretty uncommon to see a left-hand rotating engine. So that means they all turn to the right. So if we're looking at this, and if this turns to the right, turn to the right to you, turns to the right, that looks good. So if it's turning to the right, I am looking at this from a pilot's perspective. And the way it fires is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, 1. Every other one. That's why radials always have an odd number of cylinders. Unless it's a twin row, then it's two odds making even. Follow?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I will not attempt to memorize the double row radial, but so, oh, look at that. No, this is the pilot's view. Okay. Oh, I don't know next. Okay. Let's go back to that. Okay, so Lycoming is in the front. We'll just do this. A Continental. Number 1 is right rear. Let's see, we did, what should we do? We'll do this, radial engine. Firing order. All right, if I have a 9-cylinder radial engine, what's firing order?
3, 5, 7,
There we go. What if it's a 5-cylinder? 1, 3, 5, 2, 4. What if it's a 6-cylinder radial engine? That's not possible. Unless it's 2 rows. That's 2 rows of 3. Let me see.
How would that work? 1, 3, okay.
Let's see. For a twin row, rear row is all. I'm not going to even write this down, so you know you don't have to remember it. Rear row is all odds, and the front row is evens. So it fires a rear, then a front, rear, and a front. I do have it for an 18 row because that's, I think, the smallest they would make is 18. 1, 12, 5, 16, 9. Let's do this. 1, 12. So 1, 12, 5. Wow. That doesn't even make sense to me. 16. It's going to go all over the place. I would have thought it would have maybe did this one, and then yeah, it would be, and then this one, and then I would have said 1. Oh yeah, that's right. No, I'm sorry. It's every other one. So it's doing exactly what I thought. It's every other one now. So it's going to go this one, and then it's going to go probably to 9. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. So it just started. Let me go back here. A different color. It started here, and it started here. So now it's just going to go every other one after that. Do you follow what I'm saying? So if it starts here, then it's going to go to here. That's the back row. Then it's got to go, the front row is every other one. So every other one, 5, every other one, 1, 2, every other one, so that'd be 9, and then it go 2, and then it would go, I left off at 9, so that'd be 13. See how it goes, every other one. If I went 2, that'd go 6, 13 to go 17. So I guess once you figure the pattern out, which I never stopped to do until just now, it's not a big deal. All right, so firing order for 4-cylinder is what? 1 through 2, 4. And firing order for 9-cylinder radial is?
1, 3, 5, 7, 6, 8, 4, 6.
The really cool thing about radial engines, though, is the propeller. Clean that up. The propeller, if it's like this, chances are it's firing the number 1. So you're going to identify a blade, and so if I'm working on it and I got to do compression checks or something like that, I'll take the spark plug out, put my finger over it, move the prop out until it starts to compress, bring it to top dead center. You can do your compression check, which we'll talk about later, then the next one to do is going to be number 3. And what's going to happen is this prop is literally going to move around until it's pointing to number 3. That's top dead center. So one prop is always going to be pointing at the cylinder at top dead center. So it's kind of a cool thing. Not on the test. Okay. So I don't want to spend a great deal of time doing this next thing, but I want to go over all the different engines. And the more notes that I write for you, the longer it ends up taking and the more drawn out it is, and then we start losing time on the stuff that I really need to cover. So, but this is all important enough to talk about. I just don't want to write a million pieces of notes. So two-stroke. So hopefully you understand the theory of operation behind the four-stroke. That's where we spent all of our time just now. Got the 4 strokes. How many events? 4 strokes, 5 events. Well, we kind of have to do the same thing with 2-stroke. Got to have intake, compression, power, and exhaust. Everything's got to have intake, those are events, and the ignition. So everything's going to have 5 events. We just got to look for them to happen faster. So let's go. We got to go home. Let's go to 2-stroke. All right, so 2-stroke, again, 5 events. So let's look for the events. Power. Whoa, just happened too quick. All right, I got to do it manually. All right, so where we got? Stop. Ignition is happening right there. I'm sorry, no. Ignition happened. So we have the power stroke, power. Power, 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 power. Exhaust. So what it does is it uses reed valves on the intake and porting on the exhaust. So this is a little poppet valve right here that is spring-loaded. I think my Honda had actual reed valves. They were just spring steel that would just come open under pressure. So the piston goes down far enough and it's starting its exhaust. Well, what about compression? Well, let's talk about compression while we're here. Compression is happening right down here. As the piston moves down, it's compressing inside of the crankcase. And it's going to compress, 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 and then it unports this, and now it's pushing all of this back up in here. That's not really compression. I shouldn't say that. It drew it in, and now it's forcing it up is more appropriate. And so we get to right there where the fresh fuel air mixture is coming in. At the same time, it's pushing out the exhaust. Then it's going to start its true compression. So it covered up the intake port, covering up the exhaust port. Compression, 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 ignition, ignition, power. Now, so we're looking at the top now. Power, exhaust happens. The piston's coming down. It's pushing all of the fuel air mixture up this port in there. But now let's watch the bottom more. So we got it coming through. So now it's coming up. We've covered up the port here, covered up the port here. We're compressing, but let's look down here. Because the piston's going up, it's creating a negative pressure right here. So it pulled this valve off of its seat, just the fact that there's less pressure here than here, pulled it off its seat, pulling fresh fuel air mixture down into the crankcase area. Comes up, we have power, ignition, power, and as the piston starts to come down, it puts pressure on the poppet valve and closes it. All right, the thing with 2 strokes is you have to do what with the oil and fuel? Got to mix it. And the reason why is because in a 4-stroke, everything down here below the piston is pressure oiled. We got an oil pump that has oil squirt holes and it comes through the crankshaft. We're going to talk a lot about that later. And oil and force feeds oil through all of these little passages. We don't have that here. So what comes through this poppet valve is fuel, air, and oil. That's why you put oil into gas, because that oil sprays across this stuff and lubricates it. That's where you get your lubrication. So would a 2-stroke work if you didn't put oil in it? Yeah, for a little while. All right, so 2-stroke. Let's see. I don't want to not write anything. Less efficient. Less efficient and more difficult to lubricate. if you consider putting oil in your gas difficult. Let's see. Fuel and oil are mixed. Well, of course, there are some two-strokes that have an oil tank that injects it into the fuel automatically, so you just got to keep the oil tank full. All 4 events. Oops, I already said less efficient, so now we're going to change that. All 4 events. All 4 events. Actually, it's 5 events. All 5 events occur in 2 strokes. 1 up, 1 down. So that is 360 degrees of crankshaft rotation for all the events. It uses that reed valve or a rotary valve. I didn't really get into rotary valves. There are engines that use rotary valves. They're actually pretty cool. They actually slowly rotate and open up ports. Let me see. 2 strokes. Yeah, we don't need to write all that. Let me see. Yeah, we're good there. So we'll leave it at that. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
All right. Now we have the theory of operation. The rotary cycle, also known as the Wankel. The Wankel cycle, named after
Jonathan Winkle.
Albert Cycle. Come on, man. You guys know the joke. Or Sylvester. Dr. Albert Cycle. I invented that. Let's see. Oh, picture. Go back. This is your Mazda. Mazda. So again, we've got how many events? 5 events. Intake, compression, power, exhaust, and ignition was in there too. Out of order. So, but it's just happening all over the place. So we can start. So we have this. What do you call this disc here?
Dorito.
Or what?
Dorito.
Dorito. A Dorito disc. I like that. We have a Dorito disc moving around in here. Apparently, the problem with these, I'm not an expert on these, but right here at the Dorito points, you had to have a seal, and these seals apparently don't last very long.
Nope.
Okay.
Apex seals.
That's it, because this is the apex of the Dorito. That's why they call it that. All right. All right, so here we got our spark plug down here. So over here we've got exhaust happening. Over here we've got intake happening. And right here we've got some sort of compression happening and ignition. So ignition happens right there. It pushes the Dorito around, which is pushing the exhaust out, which is drawing. It already has drawn in the intake. And now it's going to compress the intake over here as power is pushing over here. So it's both happening simultaneously. And there we go. There we have the combustion is going out. We're compressing here. We're starting the intake there. And there it goes. So it all happens kind of simultaneously. Which, going back to the two-stroke, one of the advantages of the two-stroke is you have a power cycle every single time the piston goes down. So instead of every other time, it's every time. And we're going to look at the formula for horsepower, which is Planck. And one of the factors of horsepower is how many power strokes per revolution. And in a 4-cylinder, it's every 4-cycle, it's every other one. And in a 2-stroke, it's every one. And I don't know what the hell you write with this one because it's kind of always going on. So what else can we say about this one? Let me see. 4-cycle uses a rotor that turns in elliptical housing, uses 3 power pulses per rotation. Is that true? Yeah, it would be. 3 power pulses per rotation. So let's see. It's still a 4-cycle. 4-cycle. Uses a rotor. That turns in an elliptical housing. I'm not aware that they've used this in an aircraft. I think they have. I'm just not. I can't remember it. Let me see. 3 power pulses per rotation. So instead of 1 every 72, or like the 2-stroke, 1 every 36, now we have 3 per every 36. There's some good stuff, I guess, about this. Fewer moving parts. You don't have to have a connecting rod, a piston. Fewer moving parts. No pistons, no rods, cams. You could actually have it in multi-rotors, right? Who did that?
Most R7 use 2, except for Cosmo uses 3.
Okay. Cosmo.
It's only sold in Japan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good for that. Let's go on to our diesel, or compression ignition. Thing you got to know about diesel or compression ignition is don't put the DEF in the big tank. All right. Diesel. So the thing about diesel is, I think you can make it. I wrote in my notes two-stroke or 4-stroke. I don't know of any 2-stroke diesels, but
Yeah,
huh?
Detroit diesel,
What, Detroit?
Detroit diesel with superchargers on it, that those are all 2-stroke, the earlier stuff.
Really?
They didn't use them now, but
Okay, but so it is true then, huh? Okay, so this one is a 4-stroke. How many events?
4.
4. You're right no matter what you said, because it depends on how you look at it. Because we've got, slow it down, intake. Wait, where's my intake? Intake. Compression. Compression ignition. There's no ignition. It just compresses it to the point where it lights off by itself. Exhaust power. So intake, compression, ignition, power, exhaust. So it's 4 strokes. The ignition event is not done by a spark plug. It is done by the heat of compression ignites the fuel, and therefore there it goes. So that is really the only major thing about that. Now I guess it's worth noting that modern internal combustion engines are going more towards this. This is what we call this direct injection. So it's directly injecting the fuel into the cylinder, which for a very long time was a problem because the pressures to get the rail pressures, the fuel pump pressures to do this were somewhere around 30,000 psi. Yeah, they're insane numbers. And it wasn't until last 5 years or so, 10 years, where cars started, gasoline cars are now doing the same thing, where they're doing direct injection of gasoline into the cylinder, but still using a spark plug. So diesel engines. And of course, we won't use diesel in aviation. We use Jet A, which is very close to diesel. In fact, where I used to work, we had a guy who was kind of a jerk. He would always look for an excuse to defuel all the jet airplanes we worked on, the Citations. And you are not supposed to put defueled fuel back into an aircraft unless you put it back into a tank that has the filters and certified to do all that. So we would defuel these jets into 55-gallon barrels, and then he would wheel the barrels out towards the back and say, well, can't put it back in the airplane, so put it into my F-350. And so he would run Jet A in his Ford truck. So.
Would you get
I wonder if there's a benefit to that, or
like yeah, stronger?
I guess, well,
horsepower or-
what I was told is that there was a certain model year where you couldn't do it after that. And they said it had something to do with the lubrication qualities of diesel fuel is much better than Jet A, so you wouldn't get so you had to have the fuel pump. You're saying that's right?
Yeah,
Okay.
essentially what you got, I knew somebody who did it, and it was about 1 in
if you mixed it, because the lubricating properties of diesel
Yeah.
were so high, you could do about 3 tanks of Jet A before you had to do a tank of diesel. Or you could just do straight Jet A with a lubricating.
Additive.
Okay. And that's kind of what they would do. He would like 1/3 tank of diesel, then top it all off with 2/3 with Jet A. So I'm not saying that's what you should do, but there you go. Okay, diesel. What can I say about diesel?
Can't throw away.
So would that be a spark plug?
It is not a spark plug.
Glow plug?
There. Okay, so they didn't depict a glow plug in here, but until the diesel is, well, that's not what I want to say. To get them started, often the compression process doesn't create enough heat, so you have a glow plug, which is nothing more than a piece of wire that is just red hot in there. And so it just turns red hot and it just stays there. And it's an important point because at some point I'll talk about, when we get into engines and all kinds of stuff, I'll say, well, all you've done is created a glow plug in the engine. Well, if you create a glow plug in the engine, you're going to have your fuel air mixture lighting off at a time you don't want it in a gasoline engine or avgas engine. But in a diesel engine, the glow plug helps get it started, and there you go.
That's where the heat comes in, right? Heat, is that?
Yes, but once the engine is running, the glow plugs shut off, and they no longer work. You don't need them. The heat just from the piston coming up and compressing the air, compressing air makes air hot. And so it compresses the air, it gets it really hot, sprays some fuel in, the fuel lights off on its own.
So that's just like a really, really hot light bulb?
Yes. Or not a really, really hot light bulb, a regular light bulb.
Yeah.
Probably a really, really dim light bulb, because light bulbs are pretty hot if you haven't noticed. Well, not the new ones, but. All right, diesel, let's see. Definitely, yeah, we talked about there are diesel aircraft engines. What was the Diamond ones?
Diamond Star.
Diamond.
It's,
Their own version, I guess. What would be the advantage of having a Jet A/diesel aircraft engine versus the fuel we use, avgas, which is highly leaded car gas, if you will. It's not car gas, but
Longer times between maintenance cycles.
No spark plug?
I don't think you're wrong. And I'll tell you why, because we have so much lead in our fuel
Right.
that it creates a lot of problems. That's why we have to change our oil so often. That's why we have to take the spark plugs out and clean it. That's, the lead creates so many problems.
Well, I
So
just figured like no different than a normal diesel vehicle versus gas.
Yeah.
Usually the time between oil changes is longer, the engines last a lot longer because it burns so much cleaner.
okay, so I like that. I think you're right. Something I was thinking of. Anybody gets that one?
No magnetos.
No magnetos? That's another good one I didn't think of. Don't have to worry about that. Although to look at our diesel engine out there, it's like, holy crap, I don't know what's what. It looks just like a modern car. Hoses going everywhere.
They are more efficient.
Yeah, they get better fuel economy. So there's a good advantage. Also, third world countries where you're flying missionary aircraft, it's harder to get 100 low lead into these countries and store it. So I think it'd be much easier. That's why a lot of them went to the Caravans, just simply because 100 low lead was hard to deal with. So anyway, so can be 2 or 4 stroke, can be 2 or
What do the
4.
Sherpas run on? Do they run on gas as well?
The Sherpas?
Yeah, Sherpas.
Yeah, I think they're just Lycoming engines. So it's the 4-stroke operates the same as gas engine, the same as a gas engine, except that only air is drawn in on the intake stroke. It's not drawing in fuel and air, just draws in air. The diesel is injected directly into the cylinder. Near top dead center of compression.
Would this kind of engine be less according to carburetors?
Oh yeah, there would be none.
Yeah.
Not a thing of the past.
Yeah.
In the cylinder near top dead center of compression. Hot air from compression ignites the fuel. So no ignition needed. I say it's not used. But glow plugs are used for starting. All right, and I'm sorry, I kind of went past break. I didn't realize that.
Break.
Break time.
Break.